The cruel whispers followed Tessa Vaughn like a shadow as she hurried down the dusty main street of Silver Creek, Wyoming territory, clutching a parcel of fabrics to her chest in the spring of 1878. She kept her head down, a habit formed over 23 years of living with what folks rudely called her broken smile. Her top lip curled slightly upward on the right side, revealing a glimpse of her teeth even when she tried to keep her mouth closed, a birth condition that had marked her as different from the moment she took her first breath. "There she goes," someone muttered from the shadow of the general store porch. "Poor thing. No wonder Harrington called off the engagement." Tessa quickened her pace, the memory of Henry Harrington's rejection still fresh after 3 months. "I can't do it, Tessa," he'd said, unable to look her in the eye. "What would people think? Our children might inherit your condition." A tear threatened to escape, but Tessa blinked it away. She'd shed enough tears over Henry Harrington, the banker's son who'd courted her for nearly a year before revealing his true character. Silver Creek wasn't large, with barely 500 souls, but on days like this, the town felt suffocating, every glance a judgment, every whisper a knife. The bell above Madame Fontaine's dress shop jingled as Tessa entered, the familiar scent of fabric and lavender offering momentary comfort. "Ah, Miss Vaughn, you've brought the calico," Madame Fontaine, a plump woman with kind eyes, greeted her. "Just in time for Mrs. Miller's order." Tessa placed the package on the counter and attempted a closed-mouth smile. "Father's store received a new shipment yesterday." "Wonderful. And how is business at Vaughn's Mercantile?" "Steady," Tessa replied, unconsciously lifting a hand to cover her mouth as she spoke. "Father says we might expand come fall." The bell jingled again, and Madame Fontaine's eyes widened slightly as she looked past Tessa. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Parker, what brings you to my humble establishment?" Tessa turned to see a tall man filling the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the afternoon light. Dust covered his worn denim trousers and faded blue shirt. A cowboy hat hung from a leather string around his neck, resting against his back. His face was tanned from long days under the sun, and a small scar crossed his left eyebrow. "Afternoon, ladies," he said, his voice deep and warm like summer whiskey. "Just passing through town. My wagon wheel needs repairing, and I was told this shop might have some canvas I could purchase for a temporary patch." "I'm afraid I don't stock such heavy materials," Madame Fontaine replied, "but Vaughn's Mercantile surely would. Miss Vaughn here is Mr. Vaughn's daughter." The stranger's blue eyes found Tessa's, and she instinctively turned her face slightly to hide her crooked lip. "Is that so?" he asked. "I'd be much obliged if you could point me in the right direction, Miss Vaughn." "It's just down the street," Tessa said quietly, still partially shielding her mouth with her hand. "The large store with the green awning. My father should be there now." The man nodded, studying her for a moment too long. "Much obliged. Name's Dawson Parker, by the way, new to these parts." "Tessa Vaughn," she replied, dropping her eyes. "Well, Miss Vaughn, I hope to see you again at your father's store." He tipped an imaginary hat and left as suddenly as he'd appeared. "My goodness," Madame Fontaine breathed once the door closed. "He's certainly a handsome one." "And did you see those eyes? Like the summer sky?" Tessa nodded absently, her mind already calculating the quickest route back to the Mercantile that wouldn't require her to walk past the gossiping townsfolk again. "Don't worry, dear," the dressmaker said, correctly interpreting Tessa's silence. "This town will find new gossip soon enough." But Tessa wasn't so certain. In Silver Creek, some things never changed, and the town's opinion of her seemed permanently fixed. By the time she returned to Vaughn's Mercantile, the afternoon sun had begun its descent. The store was busy with the usual end-of-day customers, and Tessa slipped in through the back entrance, hanging her shawl on a peg in the storeroom. Her father, George Vaughn, a barrel-chested man with graying hair and kind eyes, was showing a customer a selection of nails when Tessa emerged from the back. She noticed the cowboy Dawson Parker examining a bolt of heavy canvas near the front counter. "Ah, there's my Tessa," her father called. "Come help Mr. Parker with the canvas, would you? I'll finish up with Mr. Simmons here." Tessa approached the counter, keeping her eyes on the ledger rather than on the customer. "How much will you be needing, Mr. Parker?" "Just enough to patch a wagon wheel until I can reach the next town," he replied. 3 yards should do it." Tessa nodded and began measuring the fabric, aware of his gaze on her. She kept her lips pressed together, a lifelong habit when in the presence of strangers. "Passing through or planning to stay a while in Silver Creek?" she asked, making polite conversation as she worked the scissors through the thick material. "Depends on what I find here," Dawson answered. "I'm looking for grazing land, thinking of starting a horse ranch." Tessa's hands paused momentarily. "There's good land to the north by Eagle Creek. The Wilkinson property's been for sale since old Mr. Wilkinson passed last winter." "Is that so?" Dawson leaned against the counter. "You seem to know the area well." "I've lived here my whole life," Tessa said, finishing the cut and folding the canvas. "That'll be $1.50. As Dawson reached for his money pouch, the bell above the door jingled and Henry Harrington entered with his mother. Tessa's stomach knotted as she saw them, and she quickly ducked her head, busying herself with wrapping the canvas in brown paper. "Good afternoon, Mr. Vaughn," Mrs. Harrington's voice carried through the store. "We've come for that special order of tea." "Of course, Mrs. Harrington." "Let me fetch it for you," George replied, excusing himself from Mr. Simmons. Henry's eyes found Tessa at the counter, and he gave her a curt nod before looking away, clearly uncomfortable. His mother didn't acknowledge Tessa at all. "Here you are," Tessa said quietly to Dawson, pushing the wrapped package toward him and taking his money. "Thank you, Miss Vaughn," Dawson replied, but he didn't move away. Instead, he observed the interaction between Tessa and the newcomers with undisguised interest. "Old friends of yours?" he asked in a low voice. "Former acquaintances," Tessa corrected, her voice barely audible. Dawson nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he noted her discomfort. "I see." He took his change and the package but remained at the counter. "I was wondering, Miss Vaughn, if you might point me in the direction of a decent boarding house. I'll need a place to stay while I look at that Wilkinson property." Before Tessa could respond, Mrs. Harrington's voice cut through the air. "Henry, dear, have you asked Miss Coleman about the church social yet? I'm sure she'd be delighted to attend with you." Tessa's cheeks burned as she heard Henry's mumbled response. She knew Elizabeth Coleman, the banker's pretty blonde niece who had arrived from Boston, just a month after Henry had broken their engagement. "Mrs. Wilson's boarding house is at the end of Pine Street," Tessa told Dawson, her voice stronger now, determined not to show how much the Harringtons' presence affected her. "Tell her I sent you, and she'll give you the corner room with the morning sun." Dawson's eyes lingered on her face, and for a moment Tessa forgot to hide her smile. He didn't flinch or look away as most strangers did when they first noticed her crooked lip. Instead, his expression softened. "I appreciate that, Miss Vaughn," he said. "Perhaps you could tell me more about the Wilkinson property sometime. I value local knowledge." Before Tessa could reply, her father returned to the Harringtons with their tea. "Will there be anything else for you today?" George asked, his tone professional but cooler than it had been with his other customers. "No, that will be all," Mrs. Harrington replied, placing coins on the counter. Henry shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting briefly to Tessa before looking away again. "Good day," he muttered as he followed his mother out of the store. As the door closed behind them, George Vaughn's shoulders relaxed visibly. He glanced at his daughter with concern. "You all right, Tess?" "I'm fine, Father," she assured him, though the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. "Miss Vaughn was just giving me excellent advice about property in the area," Dawson interjected smoothly. "You've raised a daughter with a good head for business, Mr. Vaughn." George beamed at the compliment. "That she is. Keeps all our books and knows every product on these shelves better than I do." He extended his hand to Dawson. "George Vaughn, welcome to Silver Creek. Dawson Parker, pleased to meet you, sir." If you're staying a while, you should join us for supper tomorrow, George offered. Tessa makes the best beef stew west of the Mississippi. Father, Tessa exclaimed, embarrassed. Dawson smiled, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I'd be honored, sir, thank you. After Dawson left, promising to return for supper the next evening, Tessa turned to her father with a mixture of confusion and irritation. Why did you invite him? We don't know anything about him. I know enough, George replied, straightening a display of canned goods. I know he didn't stare at your smile like you were some circus attraction, and I know he treated you with respect. He paused, his expression softening. And I know my daughter deserves better than what this town's been giving her. Tessa sighed, unable to argue with her father's good intentions. I'll make extra biscuits then, she conceded. The next evening, Tessa found herself checking her reflection in the small mirror of their modest home behind the mercantile. She had changed her dress twice, finally settling on a simple blue cotton that brought out the color in her eyes. She pinned her chestnut hair up, letting a few curls frame her face, then immediately second-guessed herself. What am I doing? She muttered, reaching for the pins to take her hair down again. Leaving it just as it is, I hope, her father said from the doorway. You look lovely, Tess. Tessa dropped her hands, turning away from the mirror with a sigh. It doesn't matter how I look, father. Men like Dawson Parker don't court women like me. George's expression hardened. And what kind of woman are you? You know what I mean, Tessa said quietly. I know that Henry Harrington was a fool who didn't deserve you, her father replied firmly. And I know that not everyone in this world is as shallow as the folks in this town. A knock at the front door ended their conversation. Tessa smoothed her skirts nervously as her father went to welcome their guest. Dawson Parker stood on their porch, his tall frame looking somehow different without the trail dust. He'd cleaned up nicely, wearing a pressed white shirt and dark trousers. His brown hair was still damp from washing, and he carried a small bundle wrapped in paper. Evening, Mr. Vaughn, he greeted George. Miss Vaughn. His eyes found Tessa, and she felt a strange flutter in her stomach at the warmth in his gaze. These are for you, Dawson said, stepping forward to hand Tessa the package. Just a small token of thanks for your hospitality. Tessa unwrapped the paper to find a small assortment of hard candies in bright colors. Thank you, she said, genuinely touched by the simple gift. Please come in. Supper was a surprisingly easy affair. Dawson spoke of his plans to raise horses, explaining that he'd learned the trade from his father in Colorado before striking out on his own. He asked questions about Silver Creek and listened attentively to the answers, showing particular interest in Tessa's knowledge of the area. You've never wanted to leave? Dawson asked as they enjoyed apple pie for dessert. See other parts of the country. Tessa hesitated, aware of her father's watchful gaze. I've thought about it, she admitted. But father needs help with the store and… She trailed off, unwilling to confess that her condition made her reluctant to face strangers' stares in new places. And Silver Creek is home, George finished for her. Though I've always told Tessa she shouldn't let the store hold her back if she wants to see the world. It's good to have roots, Dawson observed. I've been moving around since my father died 3 years ago. Beginning to think it might be time to plant some of my own. The conversation shifted to the Wilkinson property, and George offered to ride out with Dawson to see it the next day. Tessa knows the boundaries better than anyone, he added. She used to help Mr. Wilkinson with his accounts. I couldn't impose, Dawson began, but Tessa surprised herself by interrupting. I'd be happy to show you the property, she said. If you're serious about buying, you should know that the north pasture floods in the spring, but the highland meadows have the sweetest grass you'll find anywhere in the territory. Dawson smiled at her, that genuine smile that made his eyes crinkle. I'd value your expertise, Miss Vaughn. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Tessa wore her riding skirt and jacket, her hair braided and tucked under a wide-brimmed hat for protection against the sun. They rode out early, taking the north trail that wound through pine forests before opening onto rolling hills. "You ride well," Dawson commented as they cantered side by side across a meadow dotted with spring wildflowers. "Father taught me when I was small," Tessa replied. "He said every Western girl should know how to handle a horse. Your father's a wise man." They reached the old Wilkinson homestead by mid-morning. The cabin was sturdy but weathered, its windows dark and empty. The barn and corral stood empty, waiting for new life. Old Wilkinson ran about 60 head of cattle, Tessa explained as they dismounted to inspect the structures. But the land's better suited for horses. He was too stubborn to change, though the grass here is perfect for them. Dawson walked the property line with her, asking questions about water sources, winter conditions, and access to town. Tessa answered them all, finding herself increasingly comfortable in his presence. He listened when she spoke, looking directly at her face without any sign of discomfort or pity, a rare experience for her. As they paused by a stream for their horses to drink, Dawson sat beside Tessa on a fallen log. "Why did you never marry Miss Vaughn?" he asked suddenly. "If you don't mind my asking." Tessa stiffened, her hand automatically moving to cover her mouth. "I'm sure the town gossips would be happy to tell you," she said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "I'd rather hear it from you," Dawson replied quietly. She sighed, looking out across the meadow rather than at him. "I was engaged briefly. To Henry Harrington, the young man you saw in the store. He decided he couldn't marry someone with my condition." She gestured vaguely toward her mouth. "He was concerned what people would think, what our children might look like." Dawson was silent for a long moment. "You mean your smile?" Tessa nodded, still not looking at him. "May I tell you something, Miss Vaughn?" Dawson's voice was soft but firm. "Where I come from, we judge people by their character, not by things they can't control." He paused. "Henry Harrington is a fool who doesn't deserve your regret." Tessa finally turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or pity. She found none. "The Wilkinson property is perfect," Dawson said, changing the subject smoothly. "I think I'll make an offer tomorrow, which means I might be your neighbor for a good long while, Miss Vaughn. Call me Tessa," she said impulsively, "if we're to be neighbors." "Tessa," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "Then you must call me Dawson." Their ride back to town was pleasant, filled with easy conversation about horses and the coming summer and Dawson's plans for the property. By the time they returned to the mercantile, Tessa realized with surprise that she hadn't once thought to hide her smile during their last hour together. "Thank you for today," Dawson said as they parted. "Your insight was invaluable." "It was my pleasure," Tessa replied honestly. "Perhaps we could ride again sometime," he suggested. "Even after I've purchased the property, I'd value your knowledge of the area." "I'd like that," Tessa said, and she meant it. Over the next few weeks, Dawson became a regular visitor to the mercantile. He purchased the Wilkinson property and began repairs on the cabin and barn, often stopping by to ask Tessa's opinion on local suppliers or to share news of his progress. Their friendship grew naturally, built on mutual respect and shared interests. Tessa found herself looking forward to his visits, to his stories of life on the trail, to the way he listened when she spoke. For the first time in her life, she began to forget to hide her smile when in his presence. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Whispers followed them when they rode together or walked down the street after church on Sundays. Tessa overheard Mrs. Harrington telling the postmistress that the poor man must be desperate for land if he's willing to court Tessa Vaughn to get it. The words stung, but Tessa found they didn't cut as deeply as they once might have. Dawson's friendship had given her something she'd never expected to find in Silver Creek: confidence. One evening in late June, they rode to Eagle Creek after Tessa finished work at the mercantile. The summer sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks as they sat by the water, watching fish jump for evening insects. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Dawson said, breaking a comfortable silence. "The town social is next Saturday. I was wondering if you'd do me the honor of attending with me." Tessa's heart sank. The social was the biggest event of the summer with dancing and food and everyone in Silver Creek in attendance, including the Harringtons. "I don't usually go to the socials," she said quietly. "May I ask why not?" Tessa plucked a blade of grass, twisting it between her fingers. "The last one I attended was with Henry, before he broke our engagement. I haven't had the courage to face everyone since then." Dawson was quiet for a moment. "I understand," he finally said. "But I'd be proud to walk in with you on my arm, Tessa Vaughn, and I think it's time Silver Creek saw what real courage looks like." She looked up at him, searching his face. "Why are you so different from everyone else? Why doesn't my smile bother you?" Dawson shifted to face her more directly. "May I tell you a story?" When she nodded, he continued. 2 years ago, I was driving cattle through northern Colorado when a blizzard hit, got separated from my men and lost my way. Ended up taking shelter in an old mining shack, half frozen and out of supplies." He paused, his eyes distant with the memory. "Would have died there if not for a young woman who found me. She was gathering pine boughs and spotted smoke from my small fire. She brought her father back and they took me to their cabin, nursed me back to health over 3 weeks." "She saved your life," Tessa said softly. Dawson nodded. "Her name was Margaret. She had a smile just like yours, crooked on one side, the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen because it was genuine and kind, just like her heart." His voice grew quieter. "She died last winter. Fever took her and her parents both, but I never forgot what she taught me, that true beauty isn't in perfect features but in a person's actions and spirit." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry about your friend." "So am I," Dawson replied. "But meeting you, it felt like a sign. Like Margaret was telling me I'd found where I belonged." He reached out slowly, taking Tessa's hand in his. "I'm not asking you to go to the social for yourself, Tessa. I'm asking for me because I'd be honored to walk in with the most beautiful woman in Wyoming territory on my arm." Tessa's breath caught in her throat. "You truly mean that?" "I've never said anything more truthful in my life." The night of the social arrived warm and clear, with stars appearing one by one in the deepening blue of the sky. Tessa stood before her mirror, barely recognizing the woman who looked back at her. She wore a new dress of pale green silk, a fabric she'd secretly ordered from Denver weeks ago and sewn in the quiet evenings. Her hair was swept up with pearl combs that had belonged to her mother, and a touch of rose water scented her wrists. "You look like your mother," George said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. "She'd be so proud of you tonight, Tess. Do you think I'm making a mistake?" Tessa asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. "Going to the social after all this time? I think you're showing this town what real courage looks like," her father replied, echoing Dawson's words, "and I couldn't be prouder." A knock at the front door signaled Dawson's arrival. Tessa took a deep breath, gathering her courage before walking into the parlor to meet him. The look on Dawson's face when he saw her was worth every moment of anxiety. His eyes widened, and for once, the confident cowboy seemed at a loss for words. "Tessa," he finally managed. "You are breathtaking." She felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." And he did, in his dark suit and crisp white shirt, his brown hair neatly combed, his blue eyes bright with admiration. The social was held in the town hall, decorated with paper lanterns and summer flowers. As Dawson escorted Tessa through the doors, conversations paused and heads turned. She felt the familiar weight of stairs but stood taller with Dawson's hand steady at her back. Mrs. Harrington's shocked expression was almost comical. Henry, standing beside Elizabeth Coleman, looked as if he'd seen a ghost, the ghost of the confident, beautiful woman he'd foolishly discarded. "Would you honor me with the first dance?" Dawson asked, seemingly oblivious to the stares and whispers. "I'd be delighted," Tessa replied, finding to her surprise that she meant it. As they twirled around the dance floor, Tessa gradually relaxed. Dawson was an excellent dancer, guiding her with confident steps. His eyes never left her face, and his smile, that genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, made her feel as if they were the only two people in the room. "Everyone's staring," she murmured. Let them, Dawson replied. They're just noticing what I've known since the first day I walked into your father's store, that Tessa Vaughn is the most remarkable woman in Silver Creek. As the evening progressed, others approached them. Mrs. Wilson, Dawson's landlady, complimented Tessa's dress. The blacksmith and his wife invited them both to Sunday dinner. Even the mayor stopped by, congratulating Dawson on his purchase of the Wilkinson property and asking Tessa for her thoughts on improving the town's harvest festival. It was as if a dam had broken. With Dawson proudly at her side, the townspeople began to see Tessa as she truly was: intelligent, kind, valuable, rather than defining her by her crooked smile. "May I cut in?" a voice asked during their third dance. Tessa turned to find Henry Harrington standing beside them, his expression uncertain. Dawson looked to Tessa, leaving the decision to her. "One dance," she agreed, surprising herself with her calm. As Henry awkwardly placed his hands for the waltz, Tessa noted how different it felt from dancing with Dawson. Henry's touch was stiff, his eyes never quite meeting hers. "You look well, Tessa," he said as they began to move. "Thank you. I've been thinking I might have made a mistake. Last winter." His voice was low, clearly not wanting to be overheard. Tessa's steps never faltered. "Have you? You seem different now, more confident." "I'm the same person I've always been, Henry," Tessa replied evenly. "The only difference is that I've found someone who sees me clearly." Henry's face flushed. "I always cared for you, Tessa. I just wasn't sure if you could bear to have a wife with a crooked smile," Tessa finished for him. "If our children might inherit it, if people would talk." She shook her head slightly. "The problem was never my smile, Henry. It was your shame." The music ended and Tessa stepped back. "I wish you happiness with Elizabeth, I truly do." She turned to find Dawson watching from the edge of the dance floor, his expression unreadable. As she approached, he extended his hand. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. "Better than all right," Tessa replied, taking his hand. "Would you like to go outside for some air?" The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of summer flowers. They walked to a small garden behind the town hall, illuminated by the light spilling from the windows and the silver glow of the full moon. "You were magnificent in there," Dawson said when they stopped beneath an apple tree. "Especially with Henry." "I finally said what I should have said months ago," Tessa replied, "but I couldn't have done it without you." Dawson shook his head. "You've always had that strength, Tessa. I just helped you remember it." He took both her hands in his expression growing serious. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said before the social." Tessa's heart stuttered. "What is it?" "I didn't ask you to the social just as a friend or even to help you face the town." Dawson's voice was low and earnest. "I asked you because I've fallen in love with you, Tessa Vaughn, deeply, completely in love." Tessa's breath caught in her throat. "I love your intelligence and your kindness," he continued. "I love your courage and your gentle heart. And yes, I love your smile, that beautiful, unique smile that shows your true spirit." He paused. "I don't expect you to feel the same, not yet, but I wanted you to know." "Dawson," Tessa whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you walked into the mercantile and truly looked at me without flinching." His eyes lit with hope. "Truly?" Instead of answering with words, Tessa rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Dawson's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Dawson rested his forehead against hers. "That smile of yours saved me, Tessa," he murmured. "I was lost, wandering without purpose after Margaret died. Then I saw you, and it was like finding my way home." "I never thought I'd find someone who could see past my flaw," Tessa admitted. "It's not a flaw," Dawson corrected gently. "It's part of what makes you uniquely Tessa, and I love every part of you." 2 months later, on a golden September afternoon, Tessa Vaughn became Tessa Parker in a simple ceremony in the meadow of what was now their horse ranch. The entire town turned out, many bringing gifts and well wishes. Even the Harringtons attended, though they kept to the back of the gathering. As Dawson slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Tessa smiled her crooked smile without a hint of self-consciousness. The man before her had taught her the most valuable lesson of her life, that true love sees with the heart, not just the eyes. "I promise to love you every day of our lives," Dawson vowed, his voice carrying across the meadow. "To cherish your spirit, your mind, and yes, that beautiful smile that saved me when I was lost." Tessa's eyes shimmered with happy tears as she repeated her own vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Dawson lifted her off her feet in a joyful embrace, spinning her around as their guests applauded. Later, as they danced under the stars at their wedding celebration, Dawson pulled her close. "Happy, Mrs. Parker," he murmured against her ear. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Tessa replied, her crooked smile wide and unguarded. "It's funny how life works. If not for this smile that brought me so much pain, we might never have found each other." "Then I'm grateful for it," Dawson said simply. "Every day for the rest of our lives." And in that moment, under the vast Wyoming sky, Tessa knew that what had once marked her as different had become her greatest blessing, the crooked smile that had led her to the truest love a woman could find.